You still haven't told me where we're going.
She should have run the moment she saw the blood on the floor, but Nia Carter didn't run. Her heels stopped just inside the open warehouse door, her breath catching as she stared at the scene in front of her. 3 men on the ground, one of them still moving, the other 2 already still. And in the middle of it all stood a man in a black shirt, sleeves rolled to the elbows, his knuckles red, his expression calm as if he had merely finished a difficult meeting. The room went quiet when he looked at her, very quiet. His chest rose once slowly, then his dark eyes narrowed. "Who let her in?" he asked. No one answered. Nia's pulse hit hard against her ribs. She had come here for one reason only. To deliver the envelope her boss had insisted was urgent, sealed and marked with a red line she had been told never to question. She had expected a back room. Maybe a bad mood, not this, not bodies, not the smell of iron in the air. The man took 1 step forward, Nia took 1 step back. That was enough to make the 2 guards at the door move instantly, one shifting left, the other right, blocking the exit without touching her. "Please," she said, not because she thought it would help, but because fear had made her voice smaller than she liked. "I was told to bring this package to Mr. Kang." The man tilted his head slightly. Then he laughed once under his breath, not amused, more like something about her had surprised him. "You brought that here," he said, looking at the envelope in her hand, "and you're still standing." Nia swallowed. "I didn't know where I was going. That much is obvious." Her face burned. She hated that her fear was obvious. She hated even more that he was looking at her like he was trying to decide what kind of problem she was. One of the guards said, "Boss, we should leave us," the man said. The guard hesitated. "Sir, now." The word was quiet. It was also final. The guards left. Not one of them looked back. Nia stared at the door after it closed, then slowly looked back at him. He was still watching her, still calm, still dangerous. The tattoos on his neck reached up from beneath his collar like living shadows. Black ink, intricate and heavy, crawling across his skin and disappearing under the fabric of his shirt. She had never seen anything like it, not in real life, not on a man who looked this controlled, this composed, this deadly. "Give me the envelope," he said. Nia hesitated. "Who are you?" The corner of his mouth moved, but it wasn't a smile. "That depends on who's asking. I'm asking. Then you're asking the wrong questions." She hated the way his voice stayed low and even. It made everything worse. If he had shouted, she could have answered with anger. If he had mocked her, she could have mocked him back. But he spoke like a man who didn't need force to be heard. Nia tightened her grip on the envelope. "I was told Mr. Kang would take it. He would have." His eyes moved briefly to the envelope and back to her face. "If he wanted you alive when this was done." Her stomach dropped. "What does that mean?" He looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "It means someone used you." Nia's fingers went cold. "No," she whispered. "That's not possible." His gaze sharpened. "What is your name?" She almost didn't answer, then she said it. "Nia," he repeated it once in his head like he was measuring the sound of it. "Nia," he said. "Did anyone tell you why you were sent here?" "No, they said it was urgent, that it had to go to Mr. Kang personally, and you believed them. What was I supposed to do?" His eyes held hers. "Refuse." She stared at him, stunned by the answer. He watched her reaction with the same calm focus, then finally extended one hand. The movement was slow, controlled. "Give me the envelope." Something in her chest tightened, not just fear. Something else, too, something she didn't want to name. The kind of dangerous curiosity that made women ignore warning signs and step closer to men they should fear. She handed it over. He broke the seal in one clean motion and read the contents without changing his expression. Nia tried not to stare at the tattoos spread across his forearm, the strong line of his wrist, the way his fingers held the paper like he had done this sort of thing his whole life. When he finished, he folded the document once and looked at her again. "They lied to you," he said. She frowned. "Who did? Your boss, maybe more than him." Her heart started to pound harder. "My boss doesn't lie to me." The man's eyes darkened slightly. "Everyone lies to someone." Nia wanted to deny it, wanted to argue, but something in his tone made her hesitate. "What's in that paper?" she asked. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he took a step closer. Nia stood still, even though every part of her body told her to move. He was taller than she had first realized. Broad shoulders, solid build, the kind of presence that didn't need noise to dominate a room. He smelled faintly of smoke and something expensive. Cold air, maybe, or danger. "What's your boss's name?" he asked. She hesitated. "Why?" "Because I want to know who's trying to kill you." The air left her lungs. Nia stared at him. "What?" He slipped the envelope into his pocket. "You heard me." She shook her head once, slowly, as if that could force the sentence to become something else. "No. No, that's not funny. I'm not joking." Her mouth went dry. "Why would anyone want to kill me?" His gaze moved over her face, steady and unreadable. "That," he said, "is exactly what I intend to find out." Nia took a sharp breath and stepped back again. "I don't understand any of this. I know, you can't just say something like that and act calm." "I'm not calm." That made her stop. For the first time, something changed in his face, not much. Just a shift, a small crack in the steel. He looked past her, toward the door, then back to her. "How long ago did you leave your office?" he asked. Nia frowned. "About 20 minutes. Did anyone follow you?" "I don't think so." He moved fast then, crossing the room with sharp, efficient strides. He reached the door, looked out, and said something low in Korean. A response came immediately from the other side. His jaw tightened. When he turned back, the danger in the room felt different now. Closer, realer. "They know you're here," he said. Nia's throat went tight. "Who?" But before he answered, a sharp sound cracked through the air outside. Gunfire. Nia froze. The man grabbed her wrist. His touch was hot and firm, strong enough to steady her and frightening enough to remind her exactly who he was. He pulled her behind a stack of crates just as the warehouse door burst open and shouting filled the corridor. Nia crouched low, heart slamming so hard it hurt. "What is happening?" she gasped. He leaned close, his mouth near her ear, his voice hard and quiet. "Listen carefully," he said. "When I tell you to move, you move. When I tell you to stay down, you stay down. Do you understand me?" She looked at him in disbelief, terror flooding her system. "Who are you?" His eyes locked on hers. "My name is Seo Jae-hyun," he said. "And tonight you're with me." Gunfire shattered the silence again, and somewhere in the chaos outside, a man screamed her name. Nia's blood turned to ice, because she knew that voice. And suddenly she understood something terrible. She had not been sent to deliver the envelope. She had been sent to die. Nia flinched at the sound of her own name outside the warehouse, because the voice that called it belonged to Daniel Mwangi, the man who had signed her pay slips for 2 years and smiled at her every morning like he was harmless. Seo Jae-hyun noticed the change in her face immediately. "You know him," he said. Nia swallowed hard. "That's my boss." Seo's eyes hardened. "Then he sold you?" "No." The word came out too fast, too sharp. "Daniel wouldn't do that." Seo looked at her like she had just said something naive enough to be painful. "People like him do worse things than that." Another burst of shouting came from the corridor. Footsteps, heavy ones, fast. Seo reached for the back of his shirt and pulled a handgun free like it had been waiting there all along. Nia stared at it, panic rising so fast she felt dizzy. "No," she whispered. "No, I can't be here. You already are." He moved closer and lowered himself beside her behind the crates. "Can you run if I tell you to?" She shook her head. Her whole body felt locked. His gaze stayed on her for a beat. Then he reached out and gripped her chin, forcing her to look at him. "Listen to me. Fear is useful only if you control it." Nia's breath trembled. "You talk like this is normal." "For me, it is." That answer scared her more than the gun. A loud crash came from the far end of the warehouse, men shouting in Korean. One of them yelled Seo's name. Another voice answered, then silence for half a second, the kind that always came right before violence. Seo tilted his head toward the side exit. "When I stand, you stand. When I move, you follow exactly. And if I do," his eyes held hers, "then you die here." She hated how calm he sounded when he said it. He rose first, gun raised, and Nia stood because fear left her no other choice. The warehouse floor seemed to shake under the weight of everything happening beyond the crates. Through the cracks she saw figures moving fast, black suits, earpieces, one man staggering with blood on his shoulder. Seo fired once. A body dropped. Nia gasped and staggered back. "Move," he snapped. She ran. He caught her wrist and pulled her sharply toward the rear corridor, leading her through a metal door and into a narrow passage lit by one buzzing strip of white light. Her heels slipped against the concrete. Her breath came in ragged bursts. Behind them, the warehouse exploded into noise. Seo dragged her down the corridor and opened another door. Cold night air hit her face. They were outside now, behind the building, in a narrow service lane bordered by rusted fencing and stacked shipping containers. Nia bent slightly, trying to breathe. Seo checked both ends of the alley, then turned to her. "Can you keep moving?" She stared at him, furious and terrified. "Do I have a choice? You should have had one before you came here." He grabbed her elbow and guided her toward a black SUV parked in the shadows. The engine was running. Nia dug her feet into the ground. "I'm not getting into a car with you." He looked over his shoulder once, then back at her. "If you stay here, they'll find you in less than 2 minutes." She shook her head, half from fear, half from disbelief. "You expect me to trust you?" Seo leaned in slightly, his voice dropping lower. "No, I expect you to survive." The words hit harder than they should have. Another sound echoed from inside the warehouse. More footsteps, closer now. Nia hesitated 1 second too long. Seo opened the back door and shoved her inside with enough force to make her land hard across the seat. Before she could protest, he slid in after her and shut the door. The SUV moved instantly. Nia pushed herself upright, heart pounding. "What did you do to them?" Seo didn't look at her. "I bought us time, with bullets, with fear." She stared at him, breathing hard. The interior of the vehicle was dark enough that only parts of him were visible at once. The sharp line of his jaw, the broad shape of his shoulders. The black ink at his throat when the city lights flashed across the window. "Where are you taking me?" she asked. "To somewhere they won't expect." "That doesn't answer the question. It does if you're paying attention." Nia crossed her arms tightly over herself. "You act like this is normal. For me, it is." She exhaled sharply and looked out the window. The city slid past in wet streaks of light, all glass towers and reflective streets. A whole world continuing as if men weren't shooting at each other behind warehouses, while her life split open in the dark. Her phone was still in her hand. She looked down at it. No signal, of course. Seo caught the movement. "Don't try calling anyone." "Why not?" "Because if your boss arranged what just happened, he already knows who you would call first." Nia looked at him, angry now through the fear. "You keep saying that like it's true. Because it is. You don't know anything about me." Seo finally turned his head. His eyes were dark and flat in the dim light. "I know enough. That's not enough. It is when someone is trying to bury you." The car went quiet after that. Nia looked away first. They drove for 12 minutes without speaking. Then the SUV turned into an underground garage beneath a building she didn't recognize. The lights were low, the floor polished concrete, the air cold and still. Seo got out first, checked the area, then opened her door. She didn't move. He held out a hand. "I'm not touching you unless I need to," he said. "But I need you to come inside." She stared at his hand, then at his face. There was something maddening about him, not just the danger, not just the tattoos or the way men obeyed him instantly. It was the control, the way he seemed to hold violence in one hand and calm in the other. Slowly, she stepped out. The garage led to a private elevator. Seo pressed his palm to a hidden panel, and the doors opened immediately. Nia looked at that small detail and realized with a fresh wave of fear that this was not a man who improvised. This was a man who had entire systems built around him. The elevator rode up in silence. Nia stood as far from him as the narrow space allowed. Seo watched the numbers climb. Then he said, "Tell me exactly what your boss asked you to bring tonight." Her eyes narrowed. "I already told you." "A package? What kind of package?" "A sealed envelope." "What was on it?" "A red line." His jaw tightened. Nia noticed it instantly. "What is that?" He was quiet for a second too long. "A death notice." Her mouth parted. "What? He used you to move an execution order." The elevator seemed to tilt around her. "No," she said, shaking her head. "No, that's not possible." Seo looked at her with something close to pity. "You still think your boss is a safe man?" Nia's voice rose despite herself. "He's not like this." "Then why did he send you alone?" She had no answer for that. The elevator doors opened onto a floor that looked like the inside of money. Dark wood, gold lighting, heavy silence. A long hallway, cameras tucked in the corners, doors on either side. Seo led her to the last one and opened it with a keycard. Inside was a suite, spacious. Minimal, expensive in a way that didn't try to be showy. Nia stopped at the threshold. "This is your place?" "Yes, that makes me feel worse." He shut the door behind them. "Good. It means your instincts are still working." She turned to face him, anger finally forcing its way through the shock. Stop talking to me like I'm a rookie in one of your little wars. I'm not part of this, Seo stepped closer. You became part of it the moment someone put your name on that envelope. Nia lifted her chin. Then maybe you should explain what the envelope was really for. He studied her a moment, then moved past her toward a side table and poured water into a glass. He handed it to her. She didn't take it, he kept holding it out. Finally, she snatched it and drank too fast, her hand shaking. When she lowered the glass, Seo was still watching her. You're scared, he said quietly. She laughed once bitterly. You just figured that out? No, I mean scared in the right way. Nia frowned. He leaned back against the table. There's panic and then there's recognition. Panic is random. Recognition means your body knows something your mind hasn't accepted yet. Nia stared at him. He was infuriating. And somehow in the middle of all that fear, she noticed his face again. The sharp cheekbones, the calm mouth. The way the collar of his black shirt sat open just enough to show the edge of ink climbing his neck and disappearing under his jaw. Why do you have tattoos all over your body? She asked before she could stop herself. For the first time since she met him, Seo looked almost amused. Nia immediately regretted it. That was stupid. It was honest. I don't care. Yes, you do, she glared at him. He pushed off the table and took one slow step toward her. You want to know why I'm tattooed? Nia took one step back. Because men like me don't get to hide, he said. We mark ourselves before the world does it for us. The words stayed in the air. Nia looked at him and felt something dangerous twist inside her chest. Because for the first time since the warehouse, she wasn't only afraid of him, she was aware of him. And that awareness was a problem. He noticed the change in her eyes. His expression shifted only slightly, but she saw it. He saw her seeing him. That was enough to make the room feel too small. Then his phone rang. Seo's face went still. He looked at the screen once, and whatever he saw there changed the temperature in the room. Nia's voice dropped. What is it? He did not answer immediately. Then he said, your boss just ordered a second hit. Her heart stopped. And Seo Jae-hyun's eyes lifted to hers with a look so dark and certain that Nia understood one terrifying thing all at once. The night was not over. It had only just begun. Nia felt the blood drain from her face. A second hit! Seo had already turned away, one hand lifted to his ear as he listened to whatever was being said on the line. His jaw tightened, then flexed once. When he spoke, his voice was low and clipped, all the softness gone from it. Lock the east exits, he said. No one leaves the building. If he sends anyone, I want their names before they reach the street. He ended the call and looked at her. Nia stood frozen in the middle of the room, glass still in her hand, her pulse beating too hard to make sense of anything. What did you mean, second hit? Seo didn't answer right away. He crossed the room, opened a drawer, and pulled out a black pistol. He checked it with a calm that made her stomach tighten. Nia, he said, did your boss ever ask you about your family? The question hit her strangely. What does that have to do with anything? Answer me, she frowned. No. Not really. Did he know where you lived? Yes. Did he know your schedule? She hesitated. Everyone at the office knows my schedule. Seo's eyes lifted to hers. That's not what I asked. Nia's grip on the glass tightened. Slowly, her mouth went dry. He knew, she said quietly. He knew where I lived. Seo nodded once, as if confirming something he already suspected. Then this wasn't random. What was? He stepped closer. Your delivery tonight, the envelope. The warehouse, it was all a test. Nia stared at him. A test for what? To see if you could be used without asking questions. Her stomach dropped. That makes no sense. It does if your boss planned to move someone through you. She shook her head immediately. No, that's not possible. Daniel isn't. Seo's voice sharpened. You still trust him because he gave you a desk and a salary. That doesn't make him clean. Nia's eyes flashed. You don't know him. I know men like him. She looked at him, fear and anger fighting in her chest. And what kind of man are you? Seo went still. That should have warned her. Instead, he looked at her for a long moment and said, the kind your boss is afraid of. The silence after that felt alive. Nia set the glass down slowly. Outside the suite, somewhere deep in the building, a door slammed. Seo's head turned instantly. Then another sound followed, footsteps, fast, purposeful. He moved without hesitation, grabbing Nia by the wrist and pulling her behind a long, dark sofa just as the suite door rattled once under a hard knock. Nobody move, a man shouted from outside. Open the door, Seo kept Nia low against the floor, his hand pressed lightly over her shoulder, steadying her. She whispered, "Who is that?" "Not ours." The door rattled again, this time harder. A second voice called out in Korean. Seo answered in the same language, his tone cold enough to make her skin prickle even without understanding the words. The knocking stopped. 1 second of silence. Then the sound of the lock being forced. Nia clutched his sleeve. "What are they doing?" Seo looked at her once, and whatever he saw in her face made something dark move through his expression. "They're here for you," he said. "No. Yes." The door burst open. Nia gasped, but Seo had already risen. He fired once, and the first man through the doorway fell backward so fast she barely registered it. Another gun flashed. Seo turned, moved, fired again. The suite exploded into motion. Nia crawled backward, half blind with fear as more men rushed inside. The room filled with shouting, footsteps, the sharp crack of gunfire, glass breaking somewhere near the bar. Seo moved like something built for this. Fast, exact, merciless. He caught one attacker by the collar, slammed him into the wall, and drove a fist into his face. Another man lunged toward Nia. She screamed. Seo saw it in time. He fired. The man dropped only feet away from her. Nia stared at the body, horrified and shaking. "Get up," Seo barked. She scrambled to her feet. "Stay behind me." One more man appeared near the hallway entrance, and this one wasn't alone. Two more came behind him, both armed, both moving with the confidence of men who expected to finish the job. Seo's face changed. Not fear, something colder. Recognition. He spoke one word in Korean, and one of his own men appeared from the side door like he'd been waiting for that exact command. More movement, more chaos. A loud crash from the far end of the suite. Nia heard someone shout Seo's name, then another voice, a voice she knew. Daniel. Her body went rigid. Seo turned his head slightly toward her, catching the change immediately. "You know that voice?" Nia couldn't breathe. "That's him." Seo's expression went flat. "He came himself." A sick feeling spread through her chest. Daniel's voice came again, closer now, calmer than it had any right to be in a room full of violence. "Nia," he called. "Don't make this harder than it has to be." Her eyes filled before she could stop them. "Why is he here?" Seo looked at her sharply, then toward the hallway. His face was unreadable, but his voice dropped lower when he said, "Because I was right." Nia stared at him. "About what?" But he was already moving. He grabbed her arm and pulled her through the side door into a narrow private corridor. One of his men was waiting there, blood on his temple. "Back stairwell is clear," the man said quickly. Seo nodded. "Get her out." Nia looked at Seo, panic rising again. "What about you?" His gaze met hers. "I'll follow." "No, you won't." Something dangerous flashed across his face. "Nia, I'm not leaving you." The words came out before she could stop them. For a second, he just looked at her. The corridor noise rose behind them, distant but closing. Seo stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat of him even through the fear. "You don't understand what staying means," he said. Nia's throat tightened. "Then explain it." He looked at her like he might. Then the building shook with another impact, and the moment broke apart. "Go," he said. The word was sharp, final. The guard seized her wrist and led her toward the stairwell, but Nia kept looking back. Seo stood in the corridor, gun lowered at his side, eyes fixed on her with a look so intense it felt like being touched. Then he turned away. The stairwell was cold and dim, all concrete walls and emergency lighting. Nia's breath came in broken pieces as they rushed downward. 1 floor, 2 floors, 3. At the landing, the guard stopped and pressed a finger to his earpiece. Then his face changed. Nia saw it immediately. "What is it?" she asked. He didn't answer. He just looked at her with something like pity. And then she heard it too, footsteps above. Too many, fast, coming down hard. Nia's blood ran cold. The guard swore under his breath and shoved the stairwell door open into the underground garage. "Move!" They ran. The garage was darker than before, all shadow and concrete and parked cars. Somewhere behind them, a door slammed open. Voices echoed. Seo's men were fighting somewhere above them now, and the sound of it was getting louder. Nia stumbled once and almost fell. The guard caught her. Then a black sedan peeled out from the far end of the garage and stopped hard in front of them. The back door swung open. "Get in," someone said. Nia looked up and froze. It was Seo. He had blood on his shirt. His hair was slightly out of place, and he looked more dangerous than ever. She ran to him without thinking. He caught her before she reached the door fully. one hand at her waist, the other braced at her back, steadying her just long enough for her to feel how hard his body was, how real. How close to impossible. For one breathless second, neither of them moved, then his eyes dropped to her face. "You came back," he said quietly. Nia's voice shook. "I told you I wasn't leaving you." Something changed in his expression, not enough for anyone else to notice, enough for her to feel it. And then from the shadows at the edge of the garage, Daniel stepped forward. "Interesting," he said, smiling like a man who had already decided how this would end. "So this is where you've been keeping her?" Nia turned toward him slowly, disbelief and heartbreak colliding so hard she could barely stand. Daniel looked at her, then at Seo, then back again. "Now," he said, "we can speak properly." Seo moved in front of Nia at once, shielding her with his body. His voice was low, deadly calm. "You don't get to call her name like you have rights to it." Daniel smiled wider. "Oh," he said, "you really don't know, do you?" Nia's heart stopped, because whatever Daniel meant, Seo heard it too. And the way his shoulders shifted told her one thing before he even spoke. He was ready to kill somebody. Nia felt Seo's arm shift in front of her, shielding her from Daniel's line of sight. The garage went so quiet that even the distant sounds of the fight above seemed to fade into the concrete. Daniel smiled like none of this frightened him. That smile made Nia's skin crawl. "So you brought her here," Daniel said to Seo. "I'll admit I didn't think you'd be this reckless." Seo's voice came out low and flat. "You don't speak to her." Daniel laughed softly. "Still pretending this is about her safety?" Nia's chest tightened. "What is he talking about?" Neither man answered right away. That silence was worse than the gunfire. Nia looked from one to the other, feeling the floor tilt under her. Daniel had always been polished at work, always clean-cut and patient and irritatingly polite. But now there was something stripped away from him, something cold, something hidden. His eyes were on Seo, not on her, like she had become a piece on a board he was ready to move. Seo finally said, "Take a step back." Daniel didn't move. "You still think this ends with your men?" Daniel asked. "You've been too comfortable for too long, Jae-hyun. You made the mistake of thinking your name still scares everyone." Seo's jaw tightened. "It scares enough people." Daniel's eyes flicked to Nia. "Not her." Nia flinched at the way he said it. "Don't look at me like that," she said, her voice shaking now. "What is going on?" Daniel folded his arms as if they were all at a business meeting instead of standing in a parking garage full of blood and tension. "Ask him," Daniel said. Seo didn't take his eyes off Daniel. "You don't need to hear this from him." "I need to hear something," Nia snapped. "Because right now it feels like I'm the only person in this garage who doesn't know why my life is collapsing." That got Seo's attention. His gaze shifted to her face, and for a second the coldness in him softened into something rougher, more human. "You were never supposed to be involved," he said. Daniel snorted. "That's not true, and you know it." Seo took one step forward. Nia saw it in the smallest movement of his shoulders, the way his hand curled at his side, the way the tattoos under his shirt seemed to disappear and reappear with each breath. He was holding himself back. Barely. Daniel noticed, too. He smiled again, slower this time. "She's not just some assistant you happen to notice," Daniel said. "Did you really think I wouldn't know you'd look at her twice?" Nia froze. Seo went still. Daniel kept going, voice smooth as poison. "You watched her for months. You changed routines, shifted schedules, adjusted security, all because you wanted an excuse to keep her close. That part I expected. What I didn't expect was that she'd survive long enough to start asking the wrong questions." Nia's mouth went dry. She turned slowly toward Seo. "That's not true." Seo's eyes met hers and held. It was the first time she saw something like pain in them. "I didn't plan for you," he said quietly. Daniel laughed. "No, but you kept her." Nia stared at Seo. "You knew me before the warehouse?" Seo said nothing. That was answer enough. Her stomach dropped so hard it felt like stepping off a ledge. "You've been watching me. I noticed you. That's not better." "I know." Nia took a shaky breath. "Since when?" Seo looked at her for a long second. "Since the first week." The words hit like a blow. Daniel gave a small, satisfied sound. "There it is." Nia turned on him instantly. "Shut up." Daniel's expression sharpened. "You still don't understand what kind of man he is." "I said shut up. He is not your rescuer, Nia. He is the reason you were marked." The garage seemed to shrink around her. She looked at Seo again, waiting for him to deny it, to say Daniel was lying, to do something, anything that would let her breathe again, but Seo didn't speak, and the silence answered for him. Nia's throat tightened painfully. You knew. Seo's face was unreadable now, but she saw the strain in his eyes. Not all of it. That's not an answer. It's the truth. Daniel's voice cut in, colder now. He noticed you because your father's name resurfaced in one of our channels. Nia went still. Her whole body locked. No, she whispered. Daniel tilted his head. You don't know. Seo's expression changed instantly. Don't. But Daniel ignored him. Your mother never told you who your father really was, did she? He said. Or maybe she did and you didn't believe her. Nia could barely hear him now. Her father had been dead most of her life. A quiet, distant memory, a photograph in a drawer, a name her mother rarely said aloud. She had always thought that was the end of it. Daniel took a step forward. Seo moved instantly, blocking him. Say one more word, Seo said, and I'll bury you in this garage. Daniel smiled, but there was no warmth in it. You should thank me, he said to Nia. Without me, you'd still be ignorant. Nia's eyes stung. What are you talking about? Daniel looked at her with a kind of cruel patience. You were never random. Your father was tied to this world before you were born. Old obligations, old blood, very old enemies, the kind that never really disappear. The garage spun. Nia felt cold all over. She turned to Seo, and this time the question in her face was so raw it hurt to see. Tell me that isn't true. Seo's silence lasted only a second, but it was enough. Nia stepped back as if he had hit her. You knew, she whispered. Nia, you knew something. I knew there were files. I knew your name appeared in an older network record. I didn't know everything. Daniel gave a short laugh. That's what you tell yourself? Seo's voice turned dangerous. Enough. Nia's eyes blurred. She didn't care who heard the break in her voice now. Did you keep me close because of me? She asked Seo. Or because of my father? Seo looked at her for a long time. And then quietly he said, At first I didn't know the difference. That was worse than a lie. Nia stepped back again, shaking her head. No. No, you don't get to say that like it's nothing. I'm not saying it's nothing. Then what are you saying? He looked like he hated the answer, but he said it anyway. I'm saying I was too late to stop noticing you. The garage went utterly still. Nia's breath caught painfully in her chest. Daniel watched them both with open interest now, like he'd just confirmed the exact weakness he'd been hoping to find. Cute, he said. Really. But we're past that now. He lifted a hand, and two more men emerged from the far side of the garage. Nia's eyes widened. Seo's men had appeared too, from the opposite direction, weapons up. The standoff was sudden, brutal, silent. Daniel spoke first. Hand her over. Seo's response was immediate. No, Daniel smiled. Then you understand what happens next. Nia looked at the men around them, the guns, the tension, the way every body in that garage seemed locked in place around her. She felt exposed in a way she had never known before. Then Daniel said something that made her blood run colder than fear ever had. You can't protect her from the people who want her dead, he said. But you might still be able to protect her from what her father left behind. Nia stared at him. What does that mean? Daniel didn't answer. Seo's voice dropped lower, more dangerous than before. What did you bring here? Daniel smiled at him. The truth. Then he looked at Nia, and for the first time his expression lost all playfulness. Your father made a deal, he said. And the debt came due tonight. Nia's knees almost gave out. Seo caught her immediately, one arm around her waist, holding her upright. She felt the heat of him through the chaos, the strength of him, the fact that he was the only thing keeping her from collapsing right there on the concrete. She looked up at him, stunned and hurt and terrified all at once. Tell me, she whispered, that you didn't know about this part. Seo met her eyes, and she saw the exact moment he chose honesty over protection. I knew enough, he said. Nia closed her eyes for half a second. When she opened them again, Daniel was reaching into his coat. Seo saw it first. Down, he shouted. The gunshot split the garage like lightning. Nia screamed as the world exploded into motion again. Men shouted. Glass shattered. Metal rang. Seo shoved her hard behind a car, then turned and fired twice toward Daniel's side of the garage. Nia crawled low, heart slamming, ears ringing. She heard shouting in Korean, footsteps sprinting, the deep crack of another shot. Then a hand grabbed her ankle. She kicked wildly, panic surging through her. A man was trying to drag her out. Nia screamed again, clawing at the concrete, until a shadow fell over her and Seo's voice cut through everything. "Let her go." The man released her instantly. Nia looked up and saw Seo standing over her, blood on his sleeve now, one eye on the far side of the garage where Daniel had disappeared behind the smoke and chaos. He crouched in front of her. His hand touched her cheek once briefly, almost too gently for a man with blood on his clothes. "Can you stand?" he asked. Nia stared at him, trembling so badly she could barely feel her own legs. Then very quietly she said, "I don't know if I can trust you." Something crossed his face at that, not surprise, something heavier. "I know," he said. And then he did the one thing she wasn't expecting. He stood up, turned, and offered her his hand anyway. Above them, somewhere in the building, sirens began to rise. Close now, very close. Seo looked at the garage exit, then back at her. "They're coming," he said. "And this time I'm not letting them take you." Nia stared at his hand, the blood, the darkness, the man who had carried her into danger and the man who was now standing between her and it. Then she took his hand, and the moment her fingers closed around his, Seo tightened his grip like he had been waiting for that choice all along. Nia's fingers were still locked around Seo's hand when the first siren reached the garage floor. It sounded distant at first, thin, almost unreal, then it rose fast, closer, louder. Seo looked toward the entrance with a sharp, controlled stillness that made Nia's pulse jump all over again. Even now, even with blood on his shirt and chaos behind them, he looked like a man who had already accepted the worst and was deciding what to do with it. "Can you walk?" he asked. Nia swallowed. "I think so." That was not a yes. She almost laughed, but fear choked it off. "I said I think so." Seo gave a single nod, then glanced over his shoulder. One of his men appeared through the smoke, a cut over his eyebrow, breathing hard. "Boss," the man said, "North Lane is blocked. Police are already on the street." Seo's jaw tightened. "Who called them?" The man hesitated. That hesitation said enough. Seo's eyes narrowed. "Speak." "The call came from inside." Nia's chest went cold, inside the building. Her eyes darted across the garage, taking in the men, the cars, the flashing emergency lights beginning to pulse through the upper levels. Someone had betrayed them. Again. And this time the traitor was close enough to know exactly where they were standing. Seo looked at her face and seemed to understand what she had just realized. "Stay close," he said. Nia's voice came out thin. "That's your answer to everything. It works." He pulled her behind him and moved fast toward the shadowed side of the garage, where a service door led to the stairwell. Nia followed, her legs shaking badly enough that she hated herself for it. The concrete floor was slick in places from broken glass and water spilling from a damaged pipe. Somewhere behind them, men were shouting. Someone fired again. Nia flinched. Seo turned just enough to shield her with his body, then reached back and grabbed her wrist. "Do not stop," he said. "I'm trying not to." He looked at her once, and there was something in his eyes now that made her breath catch. Not softness exactly, not even tenderness. Something deeper, more urgent, like fear. For her, that realization hit harder than anything Daniel had said. They reached the stairwell door, but before Seo could push it open, it slammed inward from the other side. A man stumbled through, blood pouring from his shoulder, and collapsed hard against the wall. Two more followed right behind him. One of them shouted Seo's name. The other was already raising a gun. Seo fired first. The man dropped. Nia screamed and ducked, the sound ripped out of her by instinct. Seo shoved her into the stairwell and slammed the door shut behind them. The world went darker immediately. Only emergency lights lit the narrow concrete steps. The air smelled like dust and metal and old smoke. Seo pressed a hand against the door for 1 second, listening, then turned to Nia. "You need to move," he said. She looked up at him, shaking. "Who called the police?" "I don't know yet." "That's not what I asked." His jaw flexed. "Someone inside my circle." Nia's stomach twisted. "Then we're not safe anywhere." His gaze held hers. "We're not safe here." That should have terrified her more than it did. Instead, all she could think was that he had said we, not you, we. The stairs rattled with footsteps above them. Seo took her hand again and pulled her down one flight, then another. Nia could barely keep up. Her heel slipped once and she nearly fell, but his grip tightened instantly and steadied her before she hit the floor. By the time they reached the second landing, her breathing was ragged. Seo stopped abruptly. Nia almost ran into his back. "What is it?" she whispered. He leaned slightly to the side and looked through the narrow stairwell window toward the garage level below. Then his body went completely still. Nia knew that kind of stillness now. It was never good. "What do you see?" she asked. Seo didn't answer. He handed her the gun. Nia stared at it like it had bitten him. "I don't know how to use that." "You do now." "No, I don't." "Yes, you do." He said it with such flat certainty that she nearly argued again. Instead, she took it with both hands, trembling so much she nearly dropped it. Seo's phone buzzed once. He glanced at the screen, then his expression changed. Nia's heart sank. "What is it?" He put the phone away and looked at her. "Daniel's not in the garage anymore." "Where did he go?" Seo took one slow breath. "He's gone upstairs." Nia's eyes widened. "To where?" Seo didn't answer immediately. Then he said the one thing she had not wanted to hear. "To your apartment." Everything in Nia went cold. "No, yes. No, he can't be there." Seo was already moving again. "He can. My keys are in my bag. Then he doesn't need them." Nia's throat tightened painfully. "My mother, I know." Her voice cracked. "She's there." Seo looked at her once, and she saw the exact moment he understood how badly this could break her. Then he said, "Then we are going home." The words were simple. The effect on Nia was not. She followed him because she had no choice, because fear had shrunk the world into movement and breath and the next step. They went down to the lower level, through a side passage, and into a second vehicle waiting behind a steel partition. Seo shoved open the door, checked the interior, then motioned her in. Nia slid into the back seat, every muscle locked tight. Seo got in beside her this time. His men took the front. The car rolled out into the night with the quiet speed of something that knew how to disappear. Nia stared out the window at the wet city streaking by. The lights were blurred, halos over black streets. Somewhere in the distance, sirens flashed between buildings. Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. Seo noticed. He reached across the seat and took the gun from her carefully, then set it between them out of her reach. Nia turned toward him. "You knew about my father." "Yes, you knew about this whole thing." "Some of it." She laughed once, but there was no humor in it. "You keep saying that like it makes you sound better." "It doesn't." "No, it doesn't." She looked away again, blinking hard. The silence between them lasted almost a full minute before Seo spoke. "I should have told you earlier." Nia gave a bitter breath. "That's interesting. I'm serious." "So am I." He watched her for a moment. "Daniel used you because he thought I'd protect you." She turned sharply. "He said I was never random." "You were." She stared at him. "Then what was I?" Seo's eyes lowered for half a second. When he looked back at her, his voice was quieter than before. "A way in." Nia felt the words land in her chest like a blade. She went still. Then she whispered, "So that's it." "No, yes, it is." "That's what I am." Seo's expression changed fast, something almost fierce flashing through it. "No, Nia, that is what they tried to make you." She looked at him, breathing hard now. "And what did you make me?" That question stayed between them for a long time. When he answered, he didn't look away. "Dangerously important," he said. Nia stared at him, her mind refusing the answer even as something in her body reacted to it. The car slowed. Seo looked out the window. They were near her building now. Nia's stomach twisted so violently she thought she might be sick. The street outside looked normal. That was the worst part. Normal cars parked along the curb. A woman walking a dog. A convenience store open late, everything pretending the world had not already broken. Seo touched her wrist once. "We go in together," he said. Nia nodded automatically, then realized what he'd said and looked at him sharply. "You're coming inside?" "Yes, my mother will freak out. She can be angry later." Nia almost snapped back, but the sight of her own building stopped her. A dark sedan was parked across the street. Daniel's car, she saw it instantly, her breath caught. "He's there." Seo saw it too. The whole car seemed to tighten around them. The front passenger door opened. Daniel stepped out slowly, hands in his coat pockets, as calm as if he'd come for dinner. He looked across the street and smiled. Nia's stomach dropped. Seo was already out of the car before it fully stopped. "Stay here," he ordered. Nia grabbed his sleeve. "No." His eyes snapped to hers. "Nia." She hated how much she wanted to obey that voice. The tension in his jaw told her he was fighting his own instinct to force her to stay. But before either of them moved again, Daniel lifted a hand in a lazy little wave. And then he said, loud enough for the distance to carry, "You're too late, Jae-hyun." Seo's face turned lethal. Nia's whole body went ice cold, because Daniel was no longer looking at them. He was looking past them, toward her building, toward the windows, toward the place her mother was waiting. And then Nia heard the scream.